development's gone from 1300 to 1800, yet there's still only one access road in and out.
Yeah.
Traffic around Longwater is an absolute nightmare, and especially with the show and everything else that's going on.
The ambulance is trying to go.
It's just going to be ridiculous.
We're going to come on to highways in just a second.
Yeah, well, come on. I think, well, thank you both for coming and helping us answer some of the questions. And thank you very much for your time. And we'll move on now to
County.
Sorry, we'll move on to highways now. I was just thanking you
Marilyn.
Sorry, that's live again. So I don't know if you want to attempt to leave or are you going to stay?
We'd love you to stay.
Yeah.
He has come all the way from Bedford to talk to you.
Do you have any local knowledge? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As the chair said, I've come all the way from Bedford, but you know that's not a big deal. We manage all of the roads, not all of the roads. We manage the strategic road network nationally. So, a bit of history. I'm from the Highways Agency. We are currently known as an executive agency of the Department of Transport, and we manage the strategic road network in England, which is motorways and trunk roads. Now there is, for those of you who don't know, there is a significant distinction between the trunk road network, the strategic road network, and the local road network, which is managed and maintained by Norfolk County Council. In this particular neck of the woods, it's the A47 is the trunk road, and it's in the patch all the way from Peterborough in the west to Great Yarmouth and a little bit the A12 down towards Lowestoft. Here in Easton and Longwater, the A47 and the Highways Agency's responsibilities include the A47 carriageway itself and the slip roads on and off at Longwater up to, but not including, the two roundabouts or the bridge over the top. Sorry, but that's the way. The structure that carries the road over Longwater Junction is in fact our structure, and that's managed by the Highways Agency. But the highway that exists upon it is Norfolk County Council's. So yeah, I know it's complicated, but it's you need to sort of understand that. Obviously, where the two networks interact, it's in everybody's interest, and us talking to the county council talking to us about what we're doing on ours, what they're doing on theirs, and whether those two have consequences for the other party. So that's kind of how it works. It doesn't work. It's a bit clunky, I have to say, but generally speaking, we kind of get away with it, as it were. Some good news is that if you watch the press, beginning of December, ministers announced their roads investment strategy, and some documents will be published on that from the Department of Transport. If you stick the roads investment strategy in your network browser, you will find all sorts of documentation and announcements that were made in the beginning of December about roads investment in the future by the government. Now, of interest to you and the Eastern region is the schemes which were announced for the A47. They were a number of, there was about 70, I think, nationally, but for the A47 there were schemes announced for dualling the A47 between the A1 to Wansford to Sutton, which is the Peterborough end, junction improvement at Guy Hearn in Cambridgeshire, the dualling of the North Tubnham to Easton.
Sorry, with no interruptions while Mr. Tenner is speaking, thank you.
I wondered, I thought I was holding the microphone in the wrong place when you were waving at me. I do apologise.
No,
I'm responsible
we're not
for
taking questions yet.
So the Highways Agency, to make it clear, the Highways Agency manage and maintain the strategic road network, which is motorways and trunk roads throughout England. So in this particular area, it's the A47 that we're most interested in. And it says in the roads investment strategy announced by the government, schemes were announced for the dualling of A1 to Sutton in Peterborough, a junction improvement at Guy Hearn, the dualling of North Tubnham to Easton, the dualling of the section between Blowfield and North Birmingham, and some improvements in the area of Great Yarmouth and the A12, so those junctions. Now, those were announced for schemes to start on those things in what the Department of Transport have called Roads Investment Period 1. That runs between now and 2020. Roads Investment Period 2 will, of course, be 2020 to 2025. And within this Period 1, whilst we're working up designs and stuff for those junctions and dualling schemes that we've been asked to do, we will be looking at consultations and other things towards what the government are expected to announce for the roads period 2, which will be 2020 and beyond. So the good news is we have these schemes. We have been instructed by the Department of Transport to work up designs for them. It's early days yet. We only had the announcement in December. We are putting consultants in place to make these designs. I have no detail of what those designs might look like, what line they might take, or what the future may hold for the Eastern Roundabout. I've no idea what that's going to look like, but that will come out as the design progresses. So things are improving for the A47, and I think you should congratulate Norfolk County Council and the A47 Alliance for making the lobbies in government and things that brought those announcements to the fore. So that's where the government lies. If you need information, there's a Highways Agency information line, or there's a website which you can look at for the Highways Agency. You should find the information there. Ring the number. It will take a little while, but you will get a message through to somebody, possibly like me, to answer your question for you. With regard to planning applications generally, what the agency does, along with Norfolk County Council, is look at the development, and the developer or the applicant is expected to produce a transport assessment, which basically attempts to predict the volume of traffic which will come from a development, the direction it will go in, and the likely effect it will have on the network as it now exists. And it includes committed development which isn't yet built. If it's got permission, it is assumed to be there and fully occupied. And having done so, the Highways Agency will review that transport assessment, see whether or not it agrees with it. Is it right? Is it reasonable? Are there errors within the calculations? All of those things. And having done so, we will look and try and determine whether or not the effect, and I think the wording in the guidance documents from the Department of Transport is, will the effect be severe? In other words, will it be very much worse than it is now? And if it is mitigation necessary? Highway improvements for capacity reasons or safety reasons? All of those things are considered at the time of a planning application, any planning application, whether it's big or small. And if improvements are required, then the developer will be expected to provide them. But as yet, we've got the first submission with the planning application, which I assume is on the South Norfolk's website. I've asked some questions about it. We are awaiting the second iteration, as it were, of the second round of that particular discussion. So nothing is decided yet. There are all sorts of complicated questions that I know that Norfolk are concerned about with regard to non-motorised access and other things, but clearly I can't answer that because that's Norfolk's remit and not mine. But generally speaking, that is the general ethos of what we do. It's difficult. It's a balancing act. I realise that everybody thinks Longwater is a terrible junction, and I'm sure it has congestion, as does the Easton roundabout and a great many other lengths of the A47. But we're trying to manage a road network which, for say 18 hours of the day, works fine. The other 6 hours, the morning peak, the evening peak, bit in the middle at lunchtime, it doesn't work very well. And the difficulty is, what do? Do you engineer something to cater for all circumstances, and most of the time it sits there idle and not really serving its purpose, but only in the morning and the evening peaks? It is a balancing act. I don't say we get it right all the time, but we attempt to make it operate in a reasonable fashion and in a safe way. So that's the approach that the Highways Agency has for development. Norfolk County Council will have other more local considerations. Fairly obviously there aren't that many people that want to walk and cycle in a trunk road network. I wouldn't recommend it. Not to say that you can do that, it's not illegal to do that, but it's not a very safe environment to be doing those things. So together with Norfolk County Council, we talk about these things, and we have to understand how the systems interact, the networks interact, and whether or not delays that are bound to ensue at peak hours are acceptable in a way that they are relatively short-lived, but the system operates in reasonable safety. That's what we do. It's a balance. I can't promise you we're going to fix everything, because that would be impractical to do it, for the worst case scenario. But that's generally how these things are looked at, and I hope that's kind of helped your understanding of things. We don't just let it happen willy-nilly, but we have to do things that are reasonable. For someone to build an extension and expect them to rejig the adjacent junction would be clearly unreasonable. It's very much easier to be talking about fairly major highway improvements when you're talking about larger developments, such as the one we have proposed here now, because there is more, you've got a better calculation in the viability of these things. But as we've been hearing, there are a great many planning issues, be it education, health services, all the services, gas, water, electric, sewage, all of those things. All of those things have got to be paid for by development, and there's a limit, because otherwise the houses become unaffordable, I guess. But that's what I do. As the chair lady says, I live in an office in Bedford. We manage areas, what we call areas 6 and 8 from Bedford. Area 6 is little bits of Cambridgeshire around Peterborough, Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex. It's a big area, but we do the best we can. If you want to talk to us, please do so. Either John, I know, has my contact details, but you will find contact details generally on the Highways Agency's website. One quick thing before I go is that the ministers have decided to take some notice of what was called the Cook Report, which was written a couple of 3 years ago now, which made some suggestions about the government investing in roads on a kind of 5-year rolling funding issue, because in the past it's been very much feast and famine. Suddenly the government would be throwing money at the agency saying, go and spend it, improve this, do that sort of thing. We're all rushing around like mad things, doing all sorts of stuff. And then when the government says it's got no money, we all drop off a cliff and we don't sit around with nothing to do, but clearly the bigger schemes for improvement, which you'd all like to see, don't get done. So the Cook report said this was a bit silly, and if you did it over a 5-year period, you'd have a much better chance of planning these things and actually achieving things by the end of the 5-year period, whereupon you could look at the next 5-year period, which is why the roads investment strategy is set up the way it is. Together with that, he also felt that the Highways Agency might be better off being a separate entity rather than an executive agency of the Department of Transport, and therefore part of the civil service. Come the 1st of April, we will no longer be part of the civil service. We will be a publicly owned company, and we will be called Highways England. So, don't get confused beyond the 1st of April, because we're still there, we're still doing the same thing, but we're going to be called something else, and we're not going to be the civil servants anymore. But we're still managing the strategic road network throughout the country. So keep your eyes on the websites and all that kind of stuff. You will find announcements in the news. There are things going through Parliament at the moment in terms of changing law and other things to make that happen. But it will be happening, I am told, on the 1st of April.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can I come in there again as well? I know I keep popping up, but if I can just say something, okay? So when all this housing started coming through and people weren't objecting to the 900 houses, but as your district councillor, I was really concerned about the fact that people would not be able to get out at the Longwater Junction or by the church, because by the church the roundabout goes to single carriageway and you can't do anything. And jumping up and down on the outside, I wasn't getting anywhere. So in 2013, I stood for County Council for you, and I got in, and it was me that got onto the A47 Alliance and went along to the Highways Agency and put the Tuddenham to Easton forward as a pinch point, and we've got the funding for that in the autumn statement. So I am trying to do that. The next thing we need to do is the last bit of the NDR, because it's as far as the Fakenham Road, and we can't do anything more about that until the Secretary of State has agreed that first bit that comes as far as Fakenham. As soon as that's agreed, which will be sometime in the summer, we need, when we're working with Cossey, because they're affected by this as well, we need to sort out where the other end of that NDR comes to join up with the A47, so that it almost, with the southern bypass, makes another outer ring road to keep the traffic moving. Because we need some way, and then have a road under or over to get the traffic going towards King's Lynn or whatever. Because if we're not careful with the housing, you're never going to get out of Easton unless you go by the back lanes. And my concern is all the rat running. At the moment, if we have an accident on the A47 and people start using the little lanes to cut through near Barnum Broom and through the Mattershall bit, if we get a lorry coming one way and another coming the other, and the traffic behind it, they all back up and they can't get past. And we've had experiences where we had to get the police out and they've had to get everyone to back up both ends, and it takes forever. So, I mean, and Colton and Marlingford Parish Council experienced this, and we've got a relationship with the police to try and get them out when there is an accident, to try and make sure people are not causing those accidents. So we have thought of some of these things. It's just that in government I've found it takes years to get things to happen. But 5 years for the pinch point bit is pretty good, really, because I thought it was going to take 7. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Margaret.
And I'll keep jumping up if I think I can contribute, but you contact me if you've got a problem.
Mr. Chenry, will you take any questions?
I'm happy to take a question if somebody wants to ask one.
Can I call on Veronica then?
A lady up the back there was asked a question.
Well, all right, we'll have her first then. Can you say who you are and what the question is?
Well, all I want to know, because I missed the bit you were saying, right, and I wanted clarity on it. So what you're saying is you're responsible for the structure that goes between Easton and joins with the roundabout at Longwater, yeah? But you're not responsible for what they've tarmacked and what they've decided to put on top.
No, I think you misunderstood me.
Right, exactly. Well, we didn't hear
Sorry.
the exact.
The Highways Agency,
Responsible for the link bridge and the way that currently operates.
you're referring to the Longwater interchange, yes?
Yeah, from the
Right.
yeah.
Okay. The Highways Agency are responsible for the A47
Yeah. And the
as it goes, all the way through underneath that bridge.
Yeah.
we're also responsible for the slip roads, both on and off, in both directions, up to the roundabouts.
So not the big back.
Correct. Dereham Road, both sides of the junction, the roundabouts themselves, and the road which is carried by the Highways Agency structure are Norfolk County Council's roads. They maintain them as the Highway Authority, and they are maintained at public expense by them.
I just wanted to clarify from the health and safety and everything else, you see, because to me, actually getting from the village is horrendous with my little ones. We try cycling, we try walking, there's people that come from the show, no one get it. If you now add all that extra traffic from all this extra build, we may as well not bother.
It's precisely the considerations that we are going through. How do people get through? Well, I realise you can't now, and it's difficult now, and if you do nothing about it, it will be worse. The question is what you do about it. That's where we are. That's what we're considering.
For a situation perhaps that there is a major accident or my kiddies get run over before someone will do something.
Well, okay. I'll try and explain that one. Most government funding is based on a value for money. Okay? And you're not going to like this, so before I start, you're not going to like this. And because it's based on a value for money, if we identify, and we monitor it all the time, don't think we don't, but we do, we're looking at collisions, injury collisions particularly, all of those things, right throughout the network. If we can identify a particular place where there is an unusually large number of injury collisions, we will investigate that place and we will try and find out what the causing factors are, if they are common, and if they're not, whatever it is, and try and find means to improve it. Now, if you've decided on a way to improve that road such that you are reducing the number of injury collisions, no such thing as an accident, an injury collision will have a cost, and the improvement that you are going to make will have a cost. So one has to predict the number of accidents, the number of collisions you will save, and weigh it against the cost of saving those collisions. So it has a value for money. So when we start talking about the potential for accident, which hasn't yet happened, you can't demonstrate that value for money. That's the difficult bit. And it's almost true that people say, well, have we got to wait for an accident then for something to happen? Yeah. Well, you kind of have, because if you haven't got that evidence, you can't commit public money to it. So that's sort of how it works. And until, how could, the only thing I can say about it is, how could one expect or justify spending public money on something which has not yet happened, and yet in other places it already is happening and people are already being injured? That's the better way to look at it. I can't excuse it, that's just how it is.
It's a good job healthcare doesn't work on that principle.
Yeah. What's the value of a child's life?
To change the rules, you need to speak to the government and the minister. I can't help that.
But it comes back to the reach out to logic again, doesn't it?
It does,
we
indeed.
could work on logic, or we
I
could work on...
couldn't agree with you more.
Sorry, Robert.